She's not walking. When you look at
I couldn't.
Welcome, and I call to order the Gateway Community Charter School Board meeting, October the 22nd, 2019, well after 4:45 p.m. Welcome and thank you. Get back to it. Right now, we'll have roll call. Mr. Block. Here. Mr. Mandrick.
Present.
Campbell. Present. 2 board members are absent today. Please note, they have called in. So, we've got a full house tonight. Welcome. Thank you. It looks good out there. We're so happy to see so many of you here tonight. This afternoon, it's not nighttime, so we're glad to have you. And thank you so much for giving your time and being here. And so with that, do we have public comments?
No, ma'am, we do not.
No public comments. All right, thank you. We are moving right into the superintendent's update. Are you ready, Superintendent?
I am ready, always ready to update the board on the great things happening in our organization. So to start with, I think if you will look behind you, you will see a beautiful picture that was taken, behind you, behind the screen. And it was taken just this last week when we celebrated administrators during National Administrators or National Principals Month?
National School Administrators.
National School Administrators. So as you can see, we had all those lovely people here and we were celebrating them and enjoying them. They are holding up what is it? Tootsie Pop, and it has a thing on it saying pop quiz. We love that type of thing. So they were all enjoying that. So definitely want to be sure that the board also affirms our wonderful administrators.
Oh, we certainly do. And they do look good.
Pretty sharp looking.
Thank you, guys. A lot of you are here right now. Gosh, it's great.
So, we also have much to share. We are in the middle of, we want you to know this is our year of continuous improvement. Our competency that the whole organization is working on is continuous improvement for self and others. And we want to share with you that we are actually in the midst of 5 book studies at this time. It is a record, 5 book studies. So we are in our 20th cohort of Crucial Conversations, 20th. And the GCC administrators team, which includes our principals and vice principals, is reading Lead Like a Pirate. Our expanded cabinet is reading the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. The central office team is reading Big Potential by Sean Aker. And we have just begun this week. We'll have our first of a group of vice principals, curriculum coaches, and administrators doing a book study on a book called Unselfie, which is about social emotional learning and empathy. So we're really excited about all the learning that's taking place. That's just representative of one way that we learn. Another thing that was happening today is all of our administrators, which is partly why we might have a full house today. We're here for an IEP training for administrators that they went through. And so definitely very excited to be getting to excellence in our special education area. So along with that, we wanted to share that myself, and Mr. Sample, and Mr. Faircock, and Ms. Larissa Gonchar and Scott Gennard all attended the Wells Fargo Bank ribbon cutting event for the new Elkhorn Plaza branch. And COA was proud to receive a $5,000 check in support of their school. $5,000 check. It was big. It was big, and it was actually a big check that you could use a expo pin on, and I threatened to take one out and add one and
Okay, put 'em on.
15,000 something better. But we were very, very.
5,000 is good though.
5,000 is good. It's not the first, I think it's the second time we've received 5,000 from them. Mr. Sample, second time?
Yes.
Yeah, so very pleased with the Wells Fargo's support. Futures sports continue to be a great attention getter and a great community builder, and I wanted to share that I was able to go down for part of a recent game, and the facilities are looking great, the gym is great, and the girls were having a great time out there, and we're also winning when I was there, so it was a good thing.
We won the game?
I think there's another game tonight as well. I just said that afterwards. Mr. Sample and I were invited to attend the executive leadership group of CALSA, which is held at the AXA offices. It's an invitation-only group led by the former superintendent of Napa, Mr. Patrick Sweeney. Dr. Val Kirkman has also been involved, and we had a great first meeting and had already some good political follow-up by Jason, being in a Yolo County meeting and making some connections there with people that were in that group. So it's been a good thing, and we have, I think, 4 more meetings this year. The GCC teacher leaders team is meeting for the second cohort. It has started. Last year we started this work with Dr. Kirkman. This year we're in our second group of those. We have meetings still to occur in December, January, March, and May. And we're very excited about growing our leadership from the middle and investing in our teacher leaders. And that's work that I do together with Dr. Kirkman. Would like to share with you that at our principals meeting where you saw that great picture, we are all in that group committed to some projects called Our Shine projects. Remember that this year we are focused on Ubuntu, which is about my shine is your shine. So all the principals have created Our Shine, My Shine, Your Shine appointments with other administrators to help them shine. So we have heard already a number of great things come out of it. So people had to come together and share what is it that they have that can help someone else be successful. And that in and of itself is really good conversations. But it's been really nice seeing people really growing like that. So hope to see more of that going forward. We I recently attended the El Dorado County SELPA CEO meeting. We continue to be members in good standing with the El Dorado County SELPA, and next year all of our schools will be a part of the SELPA. Central office team had a great meeting, began their book study, Big Potential, and also went over their WPI and their PEP plans, personal excellence plans. We have a lot of changes in the central office, and so we're continuing to grow relationships as new faces show up each time we meet. And we are also doing some work with what we're calling power teams, which is a way that we are coalescing into teams that work together to do some positive things. So we'll tell you more about that in the future. I was able to attend the SCOE curriculum breakfast this last week. It was much more than a breakfast. It was a 2.5-hour presentation around adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed instruction. And it is the first of 3, and very excited to be enrolled in all 3 sessions. I do believe Sava is going to join me for a little bit of the next month, and it may be with Christine in the social emotional learning area, thought partner. It's all by myself. It's got to get times. So let's see what else. Fall Q conference. Yeah. Somebody had to be here. I saw Tiffany Santos down there. I was looking for Scott. He was hiding from me. It was a great computer user educator conference at Rancho Cordova. Saw some great stuff on social emotional learning. Saw Lily Campbell down there.
Yeah. But she wouldn't go with me. I tried to get, come on,
She's
go.
like, the administrators are in that room. I said, I'm going in that room.
That's exactly what she said. Oh, okay.
I shared with Jason afterwards. That room was social justice. That's what I needed to learn about. I didn't want to go with the administrators. So social justice, social emotional learning, and did some sketchnoting and other things. And it was a very worthwhile conference, which I couldn't attend the whole thing. But I had to drive away and go to Santa Rosa for the FICMAT board meeting.
Yes.
And FICMAT was also an interesting experience politically, too complex to put into my superintendent's update. But the times, they are a-changing. And politics around charter schools are only getting uglier. And as the recession continues to march forward, I expect there to be yet more. And there's quite a bit of discussion about A3 and Inspired, other charters that are currently
Yes.
under investigation. And unfortunately, all of us will be viewed through the lens of poor decisions that they have chosen to make. So I will keep the board informed. Also wanted to inform the board, even though the board member who asked for it is not here today, that we have been working on the safety of the lobby as board member Anderson had asked about. So we have always actually had a panic button. And so the panic button is in place. We have been locking the two side doors whenever possible. People have been using their keys to move in and out. Just only a problem if they forget their keys after using the restroom. But we are working on, and you will see a plan for a ability to buzz people into those doors and or use a card to get in.
It's enough.
So we are continuing to work on that idea of being sure that our building is safe. So other than that, I just want to say, we have a back side. Two sides. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, there are a few other things we're supposed to talk about. Okay. So at our last board meeting and at the previous special board meeting, we had asked the board to help us with some real estate negotiations that were tricky to say the least. And unfortunately, that has resolved itself and the property has been leased to a different organization despite all of our best efforts. Despite our disappointment, we do believe we have multiple other options. Mr. Sample and I even today have identified at least 3 other possibilities that I know that we will be pursuing. So we may have been down a little when we got the news, but we're not out that long shot.
Good.
We'll keep the board informed.
Please.
And then also wanted to be aware that the community engagement team has been attending elected officials' breakfast at the Yolo County Office of Ed and representing as well. This morning, we kicked off the SAVA partnership project with Heart Zones and Sally Edwards. I see who's limping out there. And we're really excited about this. SAVA's fitness and recreation pathway is going to work with athlete and author Sally Edwards on a book project that she has, and more details will follow, I am sure. If you have been on the educational services floor, you'll notice we have added 3 cubicles. They look slightly familiar. They used to be on our main floor at the chapel location, but as you know, we are adding more and more people, and Mr. Business says I can't have another building, so I have to keep putting cubicles in every corner. So we have 3 more working spaces on the floor. We have hired some new staff, and we have some new staff that we are in the process of hiring. So you will recognize that we have a facilities person. We've had a sub in that role for some time, and we have made an offer to the person who has been subbing in that role. We're very excited that he has accepted that role. We also have had for a little bit our first ever tech support and field service specialist position. Have we offered it to somebody? Have we offered it? I don't need a name.
We are checking references.
We are checking references. I knew we had some. So we are checking references. Hopefully we'll have somebody to talk about next month. But here in our midst, we actually have 2 live bodies that we have
Okay,
hired.
great.
So if we could, we would start with the community engagement specialist. Jason, would you like to introduce your staff member?
Yes, good afternoon, board. So I stand before you with great pleasure to introduce our new community engagement specialist, Manisha Bridge. She comes to us from working with Saba for the last 4 years, and we're really excited about the work that she will do, not only for Saba, but on behalf of all of the schools in GCC. So with that being said, Manisha Bridge.
Hire made by our business services department. So we have hired our director of business services, Mr. Aaron Thornsbury. Would you like to introduce your hire?
Yeah, very happy to introduce Elmira Reina. Elmira comes to us, she was the director of fiscal services at the Unified. Yeah, and before that, she worked at Vallejo and Solano County Office of Education.
That's weird. I know that face and I'm sorry. That's it.
So she comes to us with a lot of school district business experience, and I'm very glad to have her. It's her second day on the job, and she's proven quite valuable already. So. Thank you.
Last but not least, the community engagement department has finally come through with these shiny, beautiful, did I say finally?
Finally, yes.
Of your footprint. Look at that.
Oh,
For those of you in the audience who've only seen the printed copy, look, it looks pretty. You'll have to have
it is
faces.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's blue. The blueprint. It is beautiful.
All right, so that, believe it or not, is plenty for the superintendent.
That's a lot. And so right now we're hanging in and looking at other facilities for. Yeah.
Yes, we have a number of options. I've not
Right.
yet discussed them with the program itself, but yes, I do have a number of options.
So very good. Board members, any other comments? I am so happy to meet our new people. I saw my friend actually. Oh, she's here with Saba. Congratulations. Looking forward to working with both of you. I did meet our new director, but I didn't talk with her. So we're just so happy that things are coming together as they should, and we're getting good people in these positions. So we're very glad that you're here, both of you. Thank you. And now, we shall continue with our study session. We have a 4-1, Be Brave recognition. Is it for me?
No. So, we have for you a Be Brave recognition. I understand, Michael, that you're going to speak to this.
I shall speak.
Mm.
Should
Well,
I be waiting?
I don't know, I'm not in charge of this event. He says
You say
go,
go.
Jason says go.
All right, so we haven't given out of the Be Brave Award this year yet. I do not
This is
believe.
our first
Yeah,
It's
this
our
is
first
the
one of the
time.
year. And so if I may, can I please have John Campbell come up to the front? Say a few words about John. This Be Brave Award, probably many years in the coming. We only started last year, but John, this past year, had not one but 2 program moves this summer. He had the K-8 with Sarah moving that to the new campus, as well as closing down the North Sacramento site and opening up the firehouse. So we know that took a lot of time, effort, coordination, communication, and work with your staff. Also, John, his long tenure and long-term support for all of the students at CCCS, he's been there for 15 years. And so the dedication and time he puts in to help the students and families at that school is very incredible. Also, his willingness to have CCS serve as an incubator. I'm not sure if we know this, but I know at least 2 schools that have spun off from CCCS. And his work with them, when I was here, he helped those sites get off the ground, work with them on budget, coordinating a lot of different things to help those schools who are now very successful programs and organizations. So just want to honor John with the Be Brave Award, and very happy to work with you.
I gotta get my social media.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Oops, hold on. One more. 1, 2.
Can we do a group hug? A group hug?
Yeah, like you're in the
My group picture?
group hug.
My wife's here, I gotta be careful. We do a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, get us a little bit.
I thought you love each other.
There we go.
We do.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, big smiles. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Thank you,
Thank you guys all very much.
All right, let's go.
That's it.
Y'all hear us? Light out.
I give it more.
All right, we are, again, congratulations to Mr. Campbell. And we're very proud and you're very deserving of it. You worked hard along with everyone else. And now we're moving into 4.2 Sovereign CCCS Prime Report.
So let me give a little bit of context while they're coming forward. So definitely want to affirm both Mr. Elliott and Mr. Campbell. And very excited to have them come talk to the board about this great professional development that they've done together. And so, and oftentimes you don't get to hear all the great work that's happening because so much is happening. And but definitely you have some good handouts in front of you, and I know that Maury and John are going to share with some detail about the great work they're doing.
All right.
Good afternoon, Superintendent, Dr. Houston, Board, Capital. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about professional development activity we did a few weeks ago called ISCon. This is the 3rd year in a row we've had the event. The first time we've done it in the fall, so I do hope that we'll be able to move toward doing it twice per year. That's our intent. So.
While you're doing it, does the ISCon, what does it?
Independent Study Conference. So a lot of conferences just
Independent
independent
Study
con.
Conference, okay,
Right now it's short for conference.
okay.
Nothing fancy.
Oh, that's great.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah,
That makes money,
you know,
right?
I couldn't even figure it out as I was looking at it. Thank you.
So, the purpose or the why behind the event is a little bit of what you guys are talking about, right? That professional development is something that is highly valued here in Gateway Charters. It meets a lot of the things we're trying to accomplish as a district. Earlier in her report, superintendent's report, Dr. Peterson talked about continuous improvement as being one of the goals of our organization around our work with cloud improvement. Obviously, up there on the slide, you'll see Ubuntu, which is, a big part of what we're able to accomplish at this event. Our teachers teaching teachers and sharing best practices and finding ways to be able to develop their skills. It's pretty relevant to teachers. I know as an independent study teacher and an administrator, when I go to a conference, I'm often trying to figure out how this fits my school or fits what we're trying to do. And so in this model, we've already crossed those barriers before we started. So, and then some of the focus areas, things that are part of our alignment, like you alluded to, we are aligning our work to the GCC priorities and the nice hard copy blueprint you have, being our priorities there, academic outcomes, priority 3, social emotional learning, meeting diversity, as well as doing some community engagement, and that'll make a little more sense when we talk about what actually happened at the conference, and we're going to give you a copy of the program that we use for that event.
All right, so one of the pieces we wanted to do, well, really that we've done over the last 3 years, every time we hold an ISCon, we get a lot of feedback from our staff on what went well, what they like, where they'd like us to improve. What we have up on the slide for you are some specific comments from the survey this time around. It all focuses around just the great collaboration, sharing best practices, feedback from staff. At the end of the day, we come back together into one room, about 125 staff members, and the energy is amazing. It is special when you can walk back in and you have teachers fired up about the day, about what they learned, about the friends they made, about the friends that they were able to reconnect with, because across campuses, across town, we don't always get to see each other. We highlighted a lot of the positive feedback here. My favorite part of the feedback was in the critical feedback section where we asked for feedback on how to make it better. Most of the comments centered around, can we have longer sessions? Can we extend our day? We ended at 2 so teachers would have time to get back to sites. And they said, can we please just finish out the day? We want to be here until 3:30. There's so much going on, so many good ideas, so many good thoughts, so much new learning that teachers walk away thrilled. And I'm saying teachers, what I really mean to say is all staff. This was not just a teacher-focused event. We had paraeducators delivering sessions. We had outside organizations coming in delivering sessions. So this was relevant learning to every single staff member at SAVA and at CCCS.
And I'll add to that this is the first time that we actually went more than a half day. We went almost the full day, giving a little time for CCS staff to get back to the main campus. I think we went all the way till 2:30, where in the past we finished at 11:30, 12 o'clock. Yeah.
Next slide, can we hit that, John? Specific outcomes from the day. If you want to just look at some key data points, we had over 15 presenters between the two schools. 25 different sessions were offered throughout the day. We had over 125 staff in attendance, and when you put that all together, it is over 500 hours worth of professional development, professional learning between SAVA and CCCS staff. So if you want to talk about high impact activities for one day, get around learning, I mean, this is definitely a great way to do it. Meaningful PD experience, 96% of those that responded to our survey said that this was a very meaningful PD experience for them.
And to take it one step further, earlier in your report, Dr. Peterson mentioned the shine activities that administrators are doing. Maury and I are working together to shine on one another, taking one of the most impactful activities on the agenda and having a staff member cross over and do that training a little more in-depth for some or all of the staff, depending on what they're looking for. So we're going to be able to do that in mid-November, early December at the same staff members. Next thing you'll see, which you can definitely see better on the individual handout that Maury gave you guys versus on the PowerPoint, was a sample of the schedule from the day. It outlined the different breakout sessions. If you've been to a conference, it really is excellent. It's just like something you might get at a one-day conference. And then on the back side, or on the second page, there are some of the descriptions of what exactly you might have come across if you would have attended that conference. So, we want to affirm Maury and his staff for being great hosts out there at their facility on Power Inn. A lot of different breakout rooms that were conducive to the type of event and size of the event you might have PE as well as. Just some great pictures of things we have going on at the event of our teachers in action, staff members in action there. And just, people were having fun. It wasn't just like a training where we had to drag them there and trick them there with food and coffee, although we did do some of that. But definitely, the fun wasn't just that.
As we look to the future, we're going to continue doing this with Stop and CCCS. But one conversation we started to have is how do we bring a PD day like this in some way, shape, or form to the GCC? I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I think it would be a great opportunity for us as an organization with all of our schools together to highlight a lot of the great, just the great staff we have, the great programs we have, and sharing best practices on even a bigger scale. So we'll see what that turns out to be. And last, really talking about putting a program like this together, it's a lot of hours that goes into creating a schedule, to getting the presenters committed to presenting, to coaching them through just the logistics of how to do it. A lot of these presenters have not presented at a conference or a school or to a board prior to this event. So it's a lot of nerves. I mean, you talk to some of the new staff that are presenting and they're shaking going into it. But it's always fun to watch their growth even throughout just one day, and how by the end of the day, it's something they can't wait to come back and do again. So a lot goes into it, and we specifically want to affirm our curriculum coaches, and Christina Roberts is here tonight. So Christina and then some of the curriculum coaches, took this from start to finish. Obviously, we had a vision for it, but as principals, as VPs, campus principals, leadership teams, we said, hey, curriculum coaches, would you please take this on and make it happen? And we literally were able to show up, be there to support, and just enjoy the day. And these folks really took it from start to finish and made it a great event. So thank you to curriculum coaches. With that, I believe that wraps up our presentation. Anything else you want to add to it?
Just, I think maybe we can just affirm your board's ongoing support of professional development in our organization. I think you recognize the value of that, and hopefully you recognize the commitment that we are making to it for us.
One additional piece, it was awesome, I meant to say with the curriculum coach slide, but GCC cabinet also came out and participated. Dr. Peterson was there, Michael Gillespie was there, Michael Lundquist also showed up. It was great to sit in sessions with some of them throughout the day. So feeling support from all around is awesome and a great way to maintain that coherence throughout the organization.
Sounds fantastic. Okay.
Right. This is a great format.
Yes.
Over the years, I've heard so much negative feedback about professional development days, and to get 96% of the attendees saying it was a meaningful experience is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for it.
Having done conferences, even some recent independent study focused conferences last 2 or 3 years, I would say other than like the legislative updates, things like that might be offered with a general breakout session. I believe what we were offering was our, and in many cases better than what I've seen.
There is one of the conferences Sean's referring to is the Consortium for Independent Study, which we'll be attending in January with a few staff from each of our schools. And out of this list, we're hoping, last year I think we had 2 or 3 presenters. So we're hoping at least 2 or 3 of these folks are able to present at that conference in the Bay Area in January.
And I like what you say, looking at the global picture, how do you expand it and bring more teachers together to do this kind of in-service? Instead of going to other places, doing it here.
Sure. Well, I remember as a teacher doing independent study, I had a hard time, like, how am I going to make this conference fit what I do? And I think, again, like I said, we covered, kind of crossed out.
Very impressed, and we do applaud you and just admire the work that you're doing. So thank you both, and your staff, particularly your staff, because you cannot do it without them.
They ran.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. And now we are at 4.3 legislative update. And sample.
Hey, good evening, board again. I will come to you with our legislative update as we've been doing. But tonight I have a very brief one. I want to just update you. As you may have heard in the news recently, the governor signed SB 328, which was the bill that said that middle schools cannot start before 8 a.m., high schools before 8:30 a.m. We did want to let you know that we have reviewed obviously all of our school schedules. In fact, last week, Dr. Peterson led a discussion with the principals just around that very thing. Each of our schools are already in compliance, and so we envision before July 1st, 2022,
Yeah.
not having any issues because again, all of our schools are already starting beyond those times, and so we are okay. And we just want to make sure that you knew that, and that is our legislative update.
That's it?
That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
That's enough at this point.
That's it. Thank you. Well, I was just ready to listen to more. Thank you so much. And the good news, that's good news that we are there and not really having to. And it's not until 2022. So that's wonderful. Okay, so 4.4 Empowering Possibilities International, that's you again?
Yes, we will let Mr. Sandberg.
I guess I should have stayed up here. So I did want to let the board know later on in today's agenda, you have an item to approve the actual charter renewal submission that we will be delivering to the county office on tomorrow for EPIC. At this time, as we shared at the last meeting, November the 19th, we'll be doing our annual board presentation to the EPIC board. Again, this is when we go and just share what's happened this year as our annual report that we've done the last 3 years. This will be our 4th one. And then on December the 17th, we are anticipating having our public hearing as well as board action at that date and time. And we will keep you updated in terms of your role throughout the process. But at this time, we are just looking forward. Matter of fact, today, our entire Ed Services team, Dr. Peterson, have all been in the document as we're finalizing it for submission. Any questions on the EPIC charter? And again, you'll be approving that submission later on in tonight's agenda.
Any comments? Anything? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. 4.5, past board update.
So we're gonna bring Mr. Bloomquist up, who's going to update you on our now official and not embargoed
Yes,
past data.
in the paper. Oh, thank you.
Killed a few trees, it looks
Yeah.
like. Yeah.
Did you get one?
All right, good evening, board, Dr. Peterson, cabinet, colleagues. Great to talk with you all today about some information having to do with progress of our schools on one measure of our academic performance and progress, the CAS scores. They have been officially released. The actual dashboard information for 2018-19 does not get released until December 9th. But this is all now on the public reporting site and it's out there for anyone to take a look at. And what I've done is compiled some information having to do with our schools and how they are, how they did this year in comparison to our district and our county and our state. And then a little look at 3-year growth patterns over time, also compared to district, county, and state. Wanted to share the information in this format because as we move forward with regulations having to do with charter renewals and how schools are judged or taken a look at in the big picture, areas that will become important are how are our schools doing to the other schools in their district, in their county, and state averages in these areas and others. So a couple of quick things before we move forward, just some general trends in the information before we get into there's slides for each school, which we're not going to pour over extensively, but for the most part, our schools over the last 3-year period have experienced growth. Not in every area for every subject area, but as a trend, we're experiencing growth at or above county, district, and state averages in language arts and mathematics. Another interesting trend, just taking a look at when we go into them a little deeper, our statistically significant subgroups such as English learners and students with disabilities and socioeconomically disadvantaged students tend to outperform district, state, and county in many cases, which is a good indication that, we're taking a look at making sure to serve the needs of all students and closing the achievement gap. What we obviously want is for all student scores to go up so that achievement gap can be at a higher and higher level each year. But there's some positive data, and for everybody here, the one thing that we always want to remember about data is a reflection of current condition. It is one snapshot of how we're doing now and gives us good information in any direction that it takes us as to where we want to go in the future. So with that said, the other interesting trend before I move on is, as you'll see in the slides, our schools are very similar to state averages in that in English language arts, we tend to outperform mathematics at each school site. And in some cases, it's somewhat dramatic, but it's definitely something to take a look at as we're moving forward. So with that said, the first you have set up in the packet, the general format is the first slide for each school is this year. This is this year's data for CCCS in this particular slide that you have, and it should be first in your packet. And it takes a look at how our school will be at the, oh, I had meant to hit the pointer, sorry about that. Our school here will be at the top, followed by their district, and then the county and state averages for language arts overall as a subset, and then for language arts for English learners, which is EL, language arts for socioeconomically disadvantaged students, language arts for students with disabilities, and then it completes that table for mathematics. And underneath that on each of these charts is the district, in this case, Twin Rivers, Sacramento County, and then California as it goes through. So as I said before, one of the trends that we're taking a look at and trying to go deeper is language arts. 20% meeting or exceeding standard, math 4 in this particular case. And a lot of our schools, we do have a discrepancy in that area, which is something for further study. The second graph for each of our schools is this 3-year comparison with change over time. So you can see at the top of these graphs, you can see how CCCS did in 2016-17, 17-18, and 18-19. And then the center column, which is highlighted, talks about the site change for each of our statistically significant subgroups. So just in 2016-17, there were 13% of students who were meeting or exceeding. 18-19, that rose to 20. So that's a +7 increase percentage-wise over that period. And this is an interesting graph just because it shows once again that they are above the district, county, and state averages for language arts overall in terms of their growth. So the two areas that are important for this type of data analysis is number one, the overall percent of students who meet or exceed. We would like that to be as high as possible. But also, in a lot of cases, particularly when we're looking at the 5x5 and the dashboard indicators, is this growth line here. So when we're seeing pluses, that's a good sign. And as I said, not going to go over each of the slides now that we've kind of pointed it out, but we have one of these for each of our school sites. This is COA for this year, 2018-19. 47% meeting or exceeded in language arts, 43% meeting or exceeding in math. And this is a good slide that kind of points out that trend I was talking about. Our statistically significant subgroups at most of our sites are English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities. And for the most part, those subgroups perform at or above the district, county, and state averages, which is a good data point for us. Take a look at COA, Community Outreach Academy, in the 3-year data comparison. You can see that for the most part, they've remained relatively consistent. 50% meets or exceeds in 16-17, 17-18, slight drop to 47% in 18-19. But when we're looking at these over time, a lot of these numbers would be considered almost statistically insignificant. It's like they're unchanged over a 3-year time. And that's interesting when compared, the state, county, and district have a slight increase of about, well, if you look at the state, I guess it's 1 point every 3 years. So interesting data to take a look at here. ELA, once again, at 50, math 48. COA was one of the schools that had the lowest, the least difference between their language arts and math outcomes over time. EPIC, Power and Possibilities. Similar trends, particularly positive in the EPIC data trends, once again, is the performance of the statistically significant subgroups for language EL and socioeconomically disadvantaged. You see an NA here for students with disabilities, which just reflects that at times there are not enough students with disabilities who are tested so for them to become statistically significant for each of our schools. Ethics is interesting because sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't, because it's right on the edge. So you'll see in the 3-year data that we see in a minute here, that they were a statistically significant subgroup in 17-18, but we're not this year. So that's kind of something that's always right on the border. But most interesting about ethics data, once again, has to do with this site change line. Really positive growth trends in terms of language arts, also the statistically significant subgroups that are matching along with that. So good information, particularly in this case compared to county, district and county. Obviously, these numbers are different for EPIC because the district is Washington and county is Iowa. So as we go on to Futures High School, the most interesting thing about this data for our high schools is the fact that it's only one grade level that is tested. It's 11th grade. And every year it's a completely different set of students. So it's really hard to say, well, where would we project that we might be over time, because it's not necessarily comparing a cohort or similar students. And so it is interesting that sometimes these 3-year data trends that you'll see in the next slide tend to jump. But for futures for 18-19, 69% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations. And you can see that pattern of our subgroups outperforming is consistent here as well. The concern area here for us to look forward to is the discrepancy between percent meeting or exceeding in language arts or math. And actually at a future board meeting, if we have time, I'll share some of the math assessment type problems that our students are asked for, that are asked to do on the CAST. And it's interesting to see that statewide, it's taking time for our instructional strategies to catch up for the increased amount of rigor, difficulty that's being asked in these math scores. Futures over 3-year pattern. This is kind of what I was talking about with our high schools. It's not surprising that there's data fluctuation like this. 80, 56, 69. That's 3 different groups of 11th graders with different numbers and smaller numbers, not like hundreds of students being tested. So any change there can kind of increase the impact either positively or negatively in this case. Next, we move on to Gateway International, 2018-19% meeting or exceeding standard. I have to just say I had a hard time finding, saying what would be the highlight to share on this particular slide, because everything on here is a highlight with this data from GIS this year. Straight across the board in terms of how they compared this year to district, county, and state. Particularly interesting to me, students with disabilities in math and language arts. That should have said math there on the end, sorry about that. 30% of the students with disabilities meeting or exceeding standard. So if I were to jump to conclusions about this data, it would be, well, now that we have our own special ed program, it's really starting to kick in. I don't know if that's true, but that's what we like to think about. We'll continue to take a look at that data. And then in terms of the 3-year pattern for GIS, you can see these positive site change numbers too, reflecting what we're seeing in the current data as we go, as they're continuing in their growth process. Lots of factors in place there, obviously, but interesting to see some of that work coming to fruition. HLA, compared to district, county, and state, HLA, once again, highlight for this year, 18-19, 26% proficient language arts and math, statistically significant subgroups outperforming district, county, and state once again in math and language arts. And the HLA data that's most telling, again, is in this 3-year comparison with the positive trend lines in all the different statistically significant subgroup areas, with, once again, students with disabilities having a major increase in the last couple of years as compared to county, state, and local district. We moved to Saba Elk Grove, which does not have any 3-year data, being that this is their only 1-year report for this year. If there was one consistent trend that I know is going to lead to further discussion, it already has started somewhat. It's again at many of our high schools, there's this discrepancy, language arts, math. language arts now. So we have to continue to look at what is, what's tying into that and how we can make sure that, to support our students in mathematics as well. This is Saba, SCUSD, same graph, they don't have any 3-year data to share as compared to district, county, and state. And then finally, Saba Twin Rivers for this year. Remembering once again, anything that says NA means that they just were not statistically significant in numbers to attain a score. And that once again being for Saba, TRUSD, and Elk Grove, it's only 11th grade. So they have AL students, but not enough at 11th grade only who were tested in order to show these findings. And the final slide I have for here is, it says Saba TRUSD, but it was Saba TRUSD until this year, and now it's, anyway, you know the whole story of Saba, so it's not surprising that this interesting data, 3-year comparison, is here too. 14, 17, 33 doesn't seem to be much of an increase or pattern because they're really 3 separate school districts at this time. So with that said, I'm ready to take any questions or answer any follow-up information that you may have. Quite a good bit of data to go over, but also some interesting things to take a look at in our path towards continuous improvement in the future.
Anything? You already addressed some of my concerns when you said you were looking very strong at some of the areas that are the weakest around here, in particular applying math seems to be at such a discrepancy, more so than English language arts. So, we just have to figure out what are the issues and how we're going to address those issues, main thing. The information is good. I'm glad we have it here so we can see and have something there. All right. Anything else? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this good report. All right. And with that, board members, we're now moving into consent agenda items. Item number 6. And we have adoption of the minutes, both regular and special board meeting, personnel consent agenda items, purchases of $30,000, empowering possibilities, the charter renewal submission, which we've already heard about, service agreement. And our superintendent talked about that, how they're working on things for the office here. Board policy revision and GIS overnight field trip to Yosemite National Park. I will first entertain a motion for the consent agenda items. Okay, all right, it's been moved in second. And no opposition, all in favor? Aye. Any oppositions? No. Okay, so the consent agenda items are approved as indicated here. Next is item number 7, GCC Health and Other Insurance Benefit Plan Year 2018 and Employee Contribution Amounts. Mr. Business.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
So, to bring the, you could just show the other one first. Come to bring our proposed increase to benefit rates that the GCC provides to its employees. Unfortunately, benefit costs are continuing to rise at a high percentage. And that is pretty much the trend across the country, unfortunately. We went out with our Keenan, our brokers, went out to Kaiser and Western Health Advantage and negotiated the rates for the upcoming benefit year starting on January 1, 2020. We have Kaiser initially come back with 12% increase, and we were able to get that lower down to a 9.23% increase from our current rates. So you can kind of see there, we have 3 levels of Kaiser plans. We have a HMO, which is a very high coverage plan, a mid-level, and we have the high deductible plan. And so all those are increasing and be 9.23%. Western Health was a little more reasonable. They were 3.29% increase, and those are the rates there. We have 3 different tiers for Western Health. For the these are the various rate types. You can see EE only is employee only, EE plus spouse is employee spouse, employee plus children, or family. And so that's there. We'll go to the next page. Delta, the good news is Delta Dental, our dental is not increasing. It's a 0% change. We self-insure that. So we've been able to keep our rates down, and the claims have not been really growing in excess of the employee withholdings, that. So we've been able to keep that steady. Vision service, we were on a 2-year rate lock there, so those rates are not changing. We are changing to so some of our voluntary products. We're changing the vendor and carrier on that as well to the Lincoln Financial. And so that's pretty much the other products are just some accident, death, and disability. They're all voluntary products for employees that they can choose, and those are pretty consistent with the year before. So if I move to the next slide, this is what we are proposing to increase the rates. So because the Kaiser rates are going up 9.23%, we are proposing to actually increase our contribution rates by the same amount, roughly the same amount, not exactly 9.23, it might be like $1 or $2 in excess of 9.23%, but we are increasing it pretty much in relation to that Kaiser increase. So for 2019, you can see the current rates on the upper left, and we are bringing those up to the upper right. So employee only going from 602 to 660 per month, all the way down from the family level going from 1,219 up to $1,332 per month. So.
Comments? Questions? No? Entertain.
Words got I have to take time to digest this. Too much of it.
It was, the 9.23 was in the backup.
Yes.
That it was going to be increased and how much we moved from
Yeah.
where it is now to 2020.
Yeah.
So
these,
this part is.
this part here is just our what the total cost from Kaiser when they bill us, regardless of who's paying for it, whether it's GCC or the employee. So that's just showing you a comparison of the total cost with all these carriers and the different plans that we offer. And then the next slide is just what the GCC contributes towards that cost for its employees.
Yeah. Okay. So any other discussion or questions from Aaron?
I think it's good we can at least keep up with the.
Yeah, exactly, that we do have the able to do so.
The good news is we did, I'd like to add, I mean, our budget for the year can withstand this increase. We budgeted conservatively with our benefit increases. And we also have had some very good success with our Complete Care program. And that was a program we brought to the board, it was almost over a year ago, where it does provide further incentives to go onto, if your spouse is covered on another medical plan, it provides incentives for you to go onto that plan and get off of the GCC health insurance, so.
Estimated cost, yeah.
So the,
So we're actually.
Yeah.
but with your item in the fiscal impact, you said that it's estimated to be an impact to our budget of 218,612.
Yeah.
But that would be if exactly the same people took the same coverage
Yeah.
they're currently taking.
Yeah.
So it's not, that's why it is estimated. It could
Yeah,
be different, but you're not seeing the difference being material based on possible numbers.
You have a number or a figure for how many people actually have taken advantage of that and are covered by the plans?
I don't have that with me tonight. I think it is growing quite a bit. I want to say, if I had to guess, it's probably about 30 to 40 now.
And
Take it
when we actually brought it, didn't we say that in order to make it be viable, we really needed only about 10 people to take it?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lower number.
Okay, I do need to entertain a motion to accept the proposed plan for medical, yes, contributions. So moved. Second, all right. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, ayes have it, so moved. Okay, and the next one is the Area 8, GCC School Dashboard Local Indicator Update.
Is it action item?
No, just information. Okay, because I couldn't remember.
And this is the. I have to. That's okay. What, this is, that one's fine. So what you have there is a fuller version of what I'm going to share with you on a quick PowerPoint. It's just a few pages from there because this information was shared last year as well about the local indicators in the California dashboard.
Yeah,
So I'm going to kind of go over the highlights, and you have further information there that if there's any follow-up questions or anything that you'd like information on, please go ahead and do that. Feel free to ask. Each year at this time, school districts, local education agencies have to enter information into the California dashboard as a way to continue to take a look at the services that we're providing and the successes thereof and where we are in various key areas having to do with the 10 priority indicators for the state. Now, 5 of those priority indicators are measured by state level indicators, like what we were just talking about, the pupil the data in terms of student achievement, suspension rates, grad rate, et cetera. Those are the state indicators. And then these are the 5 local indicators that are added into the dashboard for each school, school district, et cetera. So each year we enter this data into the California dashboard for each of our school sites. And the process that the school sites follow having to do with that is based on the reflection tool and based on the guidance that is provided in the California dashboard. They provide either a narrative summary or do a rubric score of where they're at this year in terms of each of these areas. So you have priority number 1, basics, conditions of the school, which really is saying that each of the school reflects on and then posts the number or percentage of teachers who are misassigned, or if there are vacant positions, teachers teaching without the right credential or don't have the DL certification needed. The number of students without access to instructional materials that they can use both at school and at home, and any facilities that are deemed to be not in good repair, which means safe and clean. So what we obviously are looking at there is low numbers such as 000 when we put this information into the dashboard. We'll talk a little bit more about how we are given the score in these areas, but priority 1 talks about just these basic school conditions. We talk about priority 2, It is a information having to, in a rubric that is given to measure how are each of our schools implementing the academic standards for each of their subject areas and providing those professional development opportunities for teachers. So the report that John and Lori just gave, baked right in here into their implementation of state standards and professional development growth as a way that we are making sure that our teachers and teaching staff are trained as well as possible to implement the state academic standards. Priority 3 is about parent engagement, and this is the only area where there was any change from previous years in terms of the reporting of this information. It used to be optional for schools or districts, in this case, to provide either a narrative summary. This is how we do this, that, and the other thing. Here's how we involve parents. Here we have this many meetings. But now all sites are being asked to use the rubric tool that is given to in the dashboard setting, and it asks questions around 3 areas for each school site. How are we doing with building relationships with our parents? How are we doing with building partnerships with our parents that are focused on student achievement? And then how are we doing with seeking input from parents and community in our decision making? So that information is put out to our sites, and how we do this at GCC is they're provided last year's report, any changes, any upgrades, what's new from this year. Please fill out your rubric scores, and then they're entered centrally onto the dashboard for all of our folks, so that we make sure that we have them in a timely fashion. Priority 6 has to do with school climate, which is the same exact as last year. And this one, each site provides a narrative summary about just the analysis of the local climate surveys or the GCC school climate survey that's given. It has to be given every other year, but this is based on the surveys that we provided. What is the overall narrative about what our people are telling us about our school climate? And then finally, priority 7 talks about this access to a broad course of study. And what that's really getting at is, this is once again a narrative based on some questions that are asked. Do all students have access to a broad course of study? How many students are actually enrolling in a broad course of study? Are there any barriers that we see as to why students don't have access to a broad course of study? For instance, we don't offer health or whatever the case may be. And then any revisions, decisions, or actions that the district or the school is going to take to ensure that there is access. Broad course of study is really laid out in Ed Code, having to do with language arts, math, world language, social studies, science, all of the basic areas that you would think of in the PE, health, etc. So there's a access to what's a broad course of study for 1st through 6th versus 7th through 12th. So that information is obtained from each site, and we enter that data. And we, each school, each leader receives a score, a performance measure. There's 3 options. There's only one option that we are looking for all of our sites. There is met, there is not met, and there is not met for 2 or more years. And met, in this case, has nothing to do with, oh, we are a 5 in every level, or we think everything is perfect. Met has to do with, we've analyzed the data and we've entered this report into the system so that we can continue to look at this information to strengthen our programs over time. So MET is what we're all going to have, as shown in this wonderful because we will get that, we will get MET because we've analyzed the data and we will input the findings into the California dashboard system. Now, the part for us in terms of continuing this process to make sure that this is an action, an activity that can help us to increase or, to improve, to maintain, sustain, or increase our effectiveness in these local areas has to do with each spring now. This is kind of new also. Each spring, the local indicator data is reviewed and refreshed as a part of writing of the LCAP for the following school year, which just makes a whole lot of sense in terms of how we want to look at that data. So with that said, I want to thank my colleagues in the audience who provided all that information, particularly about parent engagement survey. And I'm here now to ask if you have any other questions, and thank you for your time.
Any questions, any comments, I was hoping to see all of that met of us, because when I was thinking particularly with the parent engagement, with the course of studies, kept thinking, we're doing all of that.
Yep.
From everything that I can see,
Yeah.
it should have looked like that,
Mhm.
and knowing what's happening, with PD, with everything that we're doing.
Right, and
So it
actually,
should look like that. Our
yeah,
parent summits and all of the things that the schools are doing, it has to be.
right, and so, I mean, in our case, the local indicators are like almost a way to, they would call it a great thing we're doing
Yeah.
instead of, but still a good measurement. I mean, if we're reflecting honestly, I mean, next generation science standards are not something that we are fully implementing
Yeah.
because it's new. And so that's a great process and a good reminder, particularly at a local level. I mean, this is information that only the schools or the school districts can gather about how the process is going at their sites with these activities. So. Good.
Any other comments on parent engagement or anything? Thank you.
Thank
A
you.
lot of work, thank you. You've been busy.
Always a pleasure.
All right. I think we're about down to the end of our board meeting. No facilities, central administration, board comments? Anything, Mr. Buck, anything? Mr. Manager? Yeah,
We have the college that a lot of communities in Saturday for all the kids, a lot of communities, and Halloween.
Harvest Festival, yeah. That seems to be the trend now. So that's this coming Saturday for students in the area. Do you have information on the craft feed or is there something?
Yes, so we are actually in our planning stage of our craft feed, and we should be having, I would say, about 2 more meetings. The information for our dates will be early March.
Okay, it's not the craft feed, it's the wine and
Oh, the
cheese.
white people talking, yes, we
Yes.
do have flyers, and we will make sure that you get that before you leave.
That's the one I was thinking about, the wine and cheese that we don't have. Yes, it was mentioned to me early and I didn't have the date down. No, somebody said what number?
So our date will be November the 13th, and the location will be at the 58 Degrees and Holdings, which is our location we've been for the last few years. And we'll make sure that you have flyers.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I guess that's it for the board comments. Next board meeting.
Next board meeting is scheduled for November the 12th. And we are looking at Sava Sac City, which is the priority location to host us.
Oh, in location.
Yes, ma'am. So I will be sending lots of reminders of the locations. Lori gets to host us one more time.
That's your line. He didn't even hear that.
No, it's chatting away over there.
He's chatting away.
I'm surprised this summer Ashley didn't
I'll get them later.
Yeah. We're coming to visit you again.
Coordinating with Scott. Just shining.
Shining, that's what you're doing, yeah. All right. Okay. Any other comments? Anything else good for the organization? If not, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Second. All right, and so, thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. All right, thank all of you for staying and being with us tonight. Good meeting, great meeting. A lot of information.
All reply to email.